Venice, in the late 17th century, was a city unlike any other, a floating world of grandeur, canals that glimmered with reflected lantern light, and streets lined with the silent whispers of power and intrigue. At first glance, it appeared to be a paradise of masks and silk, a playground for the wealthy elite, a place where every gondola glide seemed effortless, almost poetic. The aristocracy moved through its labyrinthine alleys with an air of elegance, the clinking of their glass goblets at lavish dinners echoing softly against the stone walls, carrying promises of wealth, influence, and endless celebration. The city was renowned across Europe for its festivals, particularly the Carnival, where masked revelers could dance without name or face, where appearances could be deceiving, and where secrets were both currency and weapon. Yet, beneath the shimmering beauty of Venice, there thrived a darkness that few dared to acknowledge. It was a darkness that lingered behind the velvet curtains of palaces, behind the polite smiles at salons, and behind the perfumed handkerchiefs that covered whispered malice. In this world, influence was everything, and threats, real or imagined, were eliminated with subtlety and precision. The protagonist of this tale was one such figure, an aristocrat who epitomized the elegance of Venetian society. Outwardly, she possessed a charm that drew people in effortlessly, a presence that was impossible to ignore at courtly gatherings. Her laughter, soft and measured, could light up a room, yet beneath that warmth was a mind that calculated every move, a soul that regarded human vulnerability as a tool. Her home, a sprawling palazzo overlooking the Grand Canal, was filled with art, music, and the subtle perfume of rare flowers imported from distant lands. To the casual observer, she was merely another member of the elite, a participant in the city's ritualized dances of power, influence, and appearance. But to those who looked closer, or, perhaps, were unfortunate enough to be the targets of her ambition, they would discover a different reality, a mind consumed by envy, a heart hardened by the desire to dominate, and a patience that rivaled the most strategic generals in history. Venice itself seemed almost complicit in this duality. Its narrow, shadowed alleyways provided secrecy for clandestine meetings. Its fog-laden mornings offered concealment for subtle movements and exchanges, and its labyrinthine palaces, with hidden staircases and secret rooms, created an environment where one could act with impunity. The city's aristocracy was a breeding ground for rivalry, a society that thrived on gossip and reputation. Every smile had a hidden agenda, every gift could carry a message, and every compliment might mask a threat. Within these opulent walls, power was fragile, and it was a game of survival as much as prestige. In such a setting, the line between friend and enemy blurred, and one's status could be shattered as easily as it was built. For our aristocrat, this environment was both a playground and a battlefield, offering endless opportunities to manipulate, deceive, and ultimately, to destroy. The seeds of her ambitions were sown early, nurtured by a society that prized appearances above substance. Every gathering, every masked ball, and every political alliance was a lesson in subtle manipulation. She learned that a carefully placed word, a strategic alliance, or even a carefully feigned slight could shift the balance of power in her favor. The aristocratic code demanded grace, composure, and charm, yet underneath these requirements lay a ruthless world of competition. She watched as those who underestimated her were quickly eclipsed, noticing the fragile egos and hidden insecurities of those around her. These observations, coupled with an innate cunning, allowed her to maneuver through Venice's elite with unparalleled skill. She understood, perhaps better than anyone else, that in a city so obsessed with appearances, the greatest advantage lay not in overt force, but in subtlety, the art of influencing without revealing intent, of shaping outcomes without leaving a trace. At this stage, the city itself almost becomes a character, reflecting and amplifying the tension of the aristocrats' hidden ambitions. Venice's beauty was, in many ways, a perfect camouflage for cruelty. Its canals, which seemed serene in the moonlight, mirrored the duality of human nature, tranquil on the surface, yet moving with unseen currents beneath. The palaces, adorned with frescoes of myth and legend, were silent witnesses to countless secret dealings, to whispered plots, and to the silent judgment of those who understood that survival often demanded moral compromise. And amid this world of beauty and decay, our aristocrat moved like a shadow, observing, calculating, and preparing for the moment when the true extent of her cunning would be revealed. Every encounter was a test, every smile a potential weapon, and every gesture a signal in an invisible network of intrigue. The city's festivals further illustrate the delicate balance between light and dark, celebration and menace. During Carnival, masks allowed citizens and visitors alike to step outside social constraints, creating a temporary world in which true intentions could be hidden. Our aristocrat thrived in these moments, understanding the power of anonymity, of performing one persona while secretly orchestrating another. The masked balls were opportunities to gather intelligence, to test loyalties, and to identify weaknesses. Friendships could be cultivated or destroyed with equal ease. In this environment, subtlety was paramount, and patience became her greatest ally. Each laugh, each toast, each whispered conversation was a step towards shaping the future according to her will. By the end of this section, the audience should feel both awe and apprehension. Venice, for all its splendor, is revealed as a city of contradictions, beautiful yet dangerous, elegant yet ruthless. The aristocrat emerges as a complex figure, one whose brilliance is inseparable from her capacity for darkness. Shadows over Venice are no longer merely atmospheric. They are psychological, symbolic of a society where ambition, envy, and deceit intertwine. The stage is set for the unraveling of her secrets, for the deadly pursuit of control that will soon define her legacy, and for a story that will linger in the minds of viewers, haunting in its elegance and horror. The glittering mask of aristocracy has been lifted slightly, revealing the cunning, calculating mind beneath, ready to manipulate the city around her, and foreshadowing a series of events that will shock, terrify, and captivate those who dare to witness her ascent. Beneath the glittering veneer of Venice's elite society, the aristocrat moved with a precision and poise that concealed a mind constantly calculating, observing, and strategizing. To those who encountered her at salons, dinners, and public events, she appeared the embodiment of refinement. Elegant gowns, meticulously styled hair, and an infectious, seemingly effortless charm. Her laughter was light, her gestures graceful, and her conversation polished, making her the perfect hostess, the perfect companion, the perfect aristocrat. Yet behind this flawless exterior, she meticulously scrutinized everyone she met, noting subtle cues, inconsistencies in behavior, and vulnerabilities that could later be exploited. Every interaction, every smile, every compliment was measured not only to maintain her social standing, but to observe and catalog the weaknesses of others. Her charm was a tool, a weapon as deadly in its subtlety as any dagger hidden beneath a velvet gown. Her upbringing had been equally strategic, though cloaked in the privileges and expectations of Venetian nobility. In her household, appearances were paramount, and success was often defined not by virtue but by influence, reputation, and cunning. She observed her siblings, cousins, and visiting relatives as though they were players in a complex game, noting their ambitions, insecurities, and the ways they navigated family politics. Praise was scarce and conditional, love carefully measured, and every lesson seemed designed to cultivate not only manners but mental acuity. From these early experiences, she internalized a crucial truth. In a world ruled by status and perception, kindness alone was insufficient. Intelligence, patience, and manipulation were essential. The seeds of her later ruthlessness were planted in childhood, nurtured by both the pressures of her environment and her natural propensity for observation and strategic thinking. Education further sharpened her skills. She received the standard instruction for an aristocratic girl: literature, music, languages, and etiquette, but her curiosity extended far beyond what was taught. She observed human behavior in real time, turning gatherings, dinners, and even casual encounters into laboratories for understanding ambition, desire, and fear. She noted the way influential men and women reacted to flattery or insult, how envy could cloud judgment, and how social pressures shaped decisions. These observations were never idle. Each piece of knowledge was filed away, a mental catalog she could later use to manipulate circumstances in her favor. In this way, she transformed social interaction into strategy, and every encounter into an experiment in control. As she matured, the duality of her existence became more pronounced. Publicly, she was charming, cultured, and approachable, drawing admiration and loyalty from peers and subordinates alike. Privately, she was calculating, constantly assessing threats, plotting strategies, and considering the best methods to manipulate those around her. She formed alliances not out of genuine affection, but as instruments in a broader plan, cultivating influence over powerful figures while subtly undermining potential rivals. Her ability to maintain this dual existence, balancing outward warmth with inner calculation, became one of her greatest assets. To the casual observer, she seemed untouchable, effortlessly maneuvering through social hierarchies that often crushed those less astute. Her personal relationships reflected the same calculated duality. Friends and confidants were valuable only insofar as they could serve her objectives. She carefully nurtured loyalty and dependence, offering attention, guidance, and sympathy selectively. Her generosity, charm, and perceived empathy created bonds that masked ulterior motives, ensuring that even those closest to her were unaware of the subtle manipulations at play. Those who misjudged her often fell victim to their own assumptions, underestimating the depth of her ambition and the meticulous planning that guided her actions. She became a master of perception, convincing the world of her sincerity while orchestrating outcomes that aligned perfectly with her goals. At the psychological core of her character was a fascination with control. She relished the ability to predict behavior, to influence emotions, and to manipulate circumstances without overt confrontation. Power for her was not merely political or social. It was psychological, the ability to bend perception and action to her will. Every interaction, no matter how minor, was an opportunity to exercise this power. The sense of omnipotence it gave her was intoxicating, reinforcing her strategic patience and meticulous attention to detail. Charm, intelligence, and observation were tools she wielded with precision, allowing her to shape the world around her without raising suspicion. By the end of this section, the audience is introduced to the intricate duality of the aristocrat's life. The perfection of her public image, the elegance of her manners, and the warmth of her interactions conceal a mind capable of ruthless calculation and manipulation. Venice, with all its opulence and sophistication, becomes the stage upon which she will execute her plans, a city where charm and deception are intertwined, and where the consequences of misjudgment can be fatal. The seeds of her later schemes, both brilliant and chilling, have been sown, and the audience is left with the unsettling realization that beauty, refinement, and a perfect smile can hide a mind as sharp as it is dangerous. As Venice shimmered under the late afternoon sun, its canals reflecting the golden light like molten glass, the aristocrat's attention shifted to those around her, her peers, her potential rivals, and those who might, either through ambition or misfortune, obstruct her rise. In a city obsessed with status, lineage, and reputation, even the smallest misstep could spell disaster, and every social interaction carried a hidden calculus. It was within this intricate web of connections that she began to identify her targets, individuals whose influence, wealth, or charisma could challenge her carefully constructed position in society. Each of these figures, while admired publicly for their charm, intellect, or noble pedigree, had vulnerabilities that were invisible to casual observers but immediately apparent to someone as perceptive as she. These weaknesses, whether pride, envy, or ignorance, would become the first threads of a deadly tapestry, the foundation of a plan that was as methodical as it was ruthless. The first of these targets was a wealthy merchant whose family had long held sway over the Rialto market. His influence, though largely economic, translated into subtle power within Venetian political circles. He was known for his generosity in public, hosting elaborate dinners and patronizing artists, yet he also carried a temper that could be provoked when his status was questioned. Our aristocrat recognized that his outward confidence masked insecurities about his social position. By understanding his psychology, she could exploit not just his behavior, but also the perceptions of those around him. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made, became a clue, a potential lever she could use to manipulate circumstances subtly. This was the beginning of her careful selection process, one in which she cataloged strengths, weaknesses, and the potential utility of each individual in her broader designs. Next was a rival noblewoman, equally admired in society for her wit and beauty. She moved with a poised elegance, her presence commanding attention wherever she went. Yet beneath the surface, she was ambitious to the point of desperation, seeking alliances and favors that would secure her position at courtly gatherings. Her reliance on social validation made her predictable, her actions often guided by the fear of scandal or rejection. The aristocrat observed her patterns with meticulous care, noting every instance of vanity or insecurity. These insights would later inform subtle manipulations, a compliment here, a whispered suggestion there, all designed to destabilize confidence without ever revealing intent. In this way, she wielded influence invisibly, shaping the perceptions and choices of her rivals while maintaining the appearance of decorum. A third figure emerged from the shadows of Venetian society, a younger man, newly risen in prominence through his family's political connections. Ambitious and naive, he sought recognition and favor at every opportunity, often overextending himself in ways that made him vulnerable to criticism or misjudgment. The aristocrat immediately recognized him as a tool, someone whose overconfidence could be leveraged to her advantage. By subtly guiding his decisions, influencing his social interactions, and planting seeds of doubt in his mind, she could ensure that he unwittingly played a role in her broader schemes. Every conversation, every encounter became a calculated experiment, a testing ground for her manipulative skills. Her mind cataloged reactions, anticipated outcomes, and revised strategies continuously, all while maintaining a public image of charm, kindness, and harmless sophistication. The psychological aspect of her plotting was as critical as the identification of her targets. Each individual represented not merely a potential obstacle, but a reflection of her understanding of human behavior. She observed fear, desire, and pride with the precision of a surgeon examining anatomy. Every conversation became a map of weaknesses, every interaction a test of loyalty or susceptibility. By blending patience with subtle coercion, she created a network of influence invisible to those who were subject to it. Unlike overt confrontation, which could attract scrutiny and retaliation, her approach relied on anticipation, manipulation, and the careful orchestration of perception. In this environment, influence was more powerful than force, subtlety more effective than confrontation, and patience more deadly than haste. The city itself, with its labyrinthine streets, shadowed alleys, and intricate waterways, facilitated her strategies. Venice's unique geography allowed private meetings, secret exchanges, and discreet observation, providing ample opportunity to monitor targets without detection. The canals and palaces acted as both stage and instrument for her schemes, enabling her to orchestrate encounters that seemed coincidental but were in fact meticulously planned. Servants, courtiers, and allies became unknowing participants in her orchestration, each performing their roles in the drama she was constructing. Every gesture, every glance, and every whispered word was calibrated to produce the desired reaction, whether that was fear, trust, or misplaced confidence. By the time her targets were fully identified, a subtle web of influence had already begun to form around them. She understood the importance of timing, knowing that impatience could ruin even the most carefully constructed plans. Her methods were psychological first, practical second, planting doubts, encouraging overconfidence, and isolating individuals socially to increase their vulnerability. The seeds of mistrust and rivalry she carefully nurtured would eventually sprout, leaving her targets disoriented, suspicious of one another, and increasingly dependent on the very person orchestrating their downfall. In this way, she transformed human nature into a weapon, exploiting ambition, envy, and desire to create chaos that served her purpose. The suspense in this phase of the story comes not from overt acts of violence, but from the anticipation of what is to come. The audience senses that these seemingly ordinary social interactions are the calm before a storm, that every smile and handshake conceals latent danger. The tension grows as the aristocrat's strategic patience becomes apparent, revealing her capacity for long-term planning and her willingness to manipulate circumstances with surgical precision. Venice, beautiful and serene on the surface, becomes a city on the edge, with dark currents running beneath every interaction, every festivity, and every whispered conversation. By the end of this section, the audience is acutely aware that the targets are more than just individuals. They are pieces on a board, each with a calculated role in a scheme that is only beginning to unfold. The aristocrat has transformed observation into strategy, charm into a weapon, and social interaction into a game of influence. The stage is set, suspense is palpable, and the audience is left waiting for the inevitable moment when subtle manipulation escalates into action. Every detail of Venetian life, every social nuance, and every psychological insight has been carefully integrated into her plan, creating a chilling portrait of an aristocrat poised to reshape the fate of those around her. The aristocrat's schemes had moved beyond observation and subtle influence, entering a realm where calculation met cruelty, where patience became weaponized, and where silence was more deadly than any dagger. In the quiet hours of the night, when Venice's canals were shrouded in fog and only the distant toll of church bells punctuated the darkness, she began to orchestrate the more sinister elements of her plan. Poison, a tool both discreet and merciless, became her instrument of choice. Unlike overt violence, which could attract attention, scandal, or retaliation, poison offered control without confrontation, allowing her to strike at the heart of her rivals while maintaining the appearance of civility. Every step, from the selection of the substance to the administration of the lethal dose, was calculated with meticulous precision, reflecting not just intelligence but a chilling detachment from the suffering she inflicted. Her understanding of poisons was extensive, drawn from books, alchemical experiments, and the whispered knowledge of apothecaries who trafficked in secrets as much as substances. She knew which herbs could induce fevers, which powders could mimic natural illness, and how the slow onset of symptoms could mask intentionality. Each poison had a purpose. Some were subtle, meant to weaken over weeks, eroding strength and patience. Others acted swiftly, delivering irreversible consequences while appearing accidental. The aristocrat understood the psychology of fear as well as the chemistry of death. She did not simply aim to remove rivals. She sought to dominate them, to demonstrate through unseen forces that she controlled not only social outcomes, but life itself. The knowledge that death could be administered unseen gave her a sense of omnipotence, an intoxicating blend of power and invulnerability. Preparation was ritualistic. Her palazzo, normally a space of elegance and culture, became a laboratory for subtle malevolence. Vials were arranged with care, powders ground to precise textures, and tinctures labeled in codes only she could decipher. Every movement was deliberate, every act rehearsed mentally before execution. Servants, oblivious to the true nature of their mistress's experiments, carried out innocuous tasks that facilitated her plans, fetching herbs, delivering messages, or cleaning spaces where she would later prepare her poisons. Even in these mundane moments, she exercised control, orchestrating the environment to her advantage, ensuring that no variable could compromise her designs. The meticulousness of her preparations reflected both genius and madness, revealing a mind capable of extraordinary foresight, yet chillingly detached from empathy. Her victims, meanwhile, were carefully observed, their habits, routines, and vulnerabilities catalogued with clinical precision. The aristocrats studied what they ate, when they dined, and which courtiers they trusted implicitly. She noted medical histories, dietary preferences, and even subtle superstitions that could be manipulated to her advantage. By weaving herself into the daily rhythms of her targets' lives, she could administer poison in ways that seemed accidental: an extra sip of wine, a misjudged portion of soup, or a seemingly harmless herbal remedy. In doing so, she transformed routine life into a theater of death, where each act was a calculated move in a silent, deadly game. Her approach relied on patience above all else. Hasty action could draw suspicion, whereas a slow, methodical campaign allowed both control and anonymity. Psychologically, the act of poisoning offered more than practical advantage. It satisfied a deeper compulsion for control and dominance. Each illness induced, each fevered night endured by a rival, was a testament to her ability to shape reality according to her will. The aristocrat relished the uncertainty her victims felt, the invisible threat that loomed over them without comprehension. There was artistry in the timing, in the subtlety of symptoms, in the dramatic irony that she, the orchestrator, remained untouched while those around her suffered. Even those who survived minor afflictions were altered by fear, weakened by doubt, and more easily manipulated in subsequent interactions. In this way, poison was not merely a tool of elimination but a weapon of psychological warfare, a means to bend others' lives and choices to her will without overt confrontation. Her methods extended beyond chemical knowledge. They required social mastery, manipulation, and timing. She exploited the trust of family members, servants, and physicians, using their assumptions to conceal her actions. A letter delivered at the right moment could draw a rival to an opportune location. A subtle suggestion to a confidant could alter behavior without the slightest hint of malice. In this intricate network of influence, she remained the unseen architect, orchestrating outcomes with an elegance that disguised their deadly nature. Every small action, every casual word, contributed to a larger strategy, a map of human weakness that she navigated with unmatched skill. Venice itself, with its secluded rooms, shadowed alleys, and secretive waterways, became her accomplice, providing both cover and context for her machinations. Despite the outward calm of society, fear and uncertainty began to seep into the lives of those around her. Patterns of illness, unexplained fevers, and sudden weakness were noticed by servants and family members, yet explanations were elusive. The subtlety of her methods made detection nearly impossible, allowing her to maintain her public persona while chaos quietly unfolded behind closed doors. Suspicion, when it arose, was often misdirected. Rivalries within the aristocracy ensured that blame was assigned to jealousy, divine retribution, or natural causes rather than human calculation. This veil of deception reinforced her power, demonstrating the terrifying effectiveness of patience, foresight, and manipulation. By the end of this section, the audience perceives the aristocrat as both brilliant and terrifying. Her methods reveal a mind that is meticulous, calculating, and chillingly detached from empathy. Poison, patience, and manipulation combine to create a form of control that is invisible yet absolute. The elegance of her surroundings, the sophistication of her behavior, and the subtlety of her execution contrast sharply with the horror of her actions. The tension is palpable, as viewers recognize the inexorable trajectory of her plans, the inevitability of her victims' suffering, and the mastery with which she balances charm and malevolence. Venice, beautiful yet dangerous, becomes the perfect stage for a drama in which intellect, ambition, and cruelty converge in a deadly dance. Even the most meticulously constructed plans have a way of leaving traces, subtle fingerprints that can be read by those perceptive enough to notice. For the aristocrat, whose life had until now been a seamless performance of charm and calculated manipulation, cracks began to appear in the facade. Her victims' unexpected illnesses, the slow accumulation of misfortunes among those closest to her, and the whispered rumors in Venetian salons created an undercurrent of unease that could no longer be ignored. Venice, with all its sophistication, was also a city of gossip, a place where observation and rumor often carried more weight than law or evidence. The careful lattice of deception she had woven was beginning to fray, and as it did, the aristocrat found herself navigating an increasingly dangerous terrain. The tension was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, a shadow that followed her through corridors, palaces, and canals alike, threatening to expose the deadly genius behind her perfectly crafted public persona. Those closest to her, from household staff to loyal acquaintances, began noticing patterns. A servant might mention a sudden, inexplicable weakness in a guest. A family member could remark on repeated bouts of illness among visiting nobles. A physician might express concern over symptoms that did not align with conventional understanding. These observations, when isolated, appeared inconsequential, easily dismissed as coincidence or bad luck. But collectively, they formed a mosaic of suspicion, one that could potentially unravel her empire of control. The aristocrat's brilliance lay in her ability to anticipate such scrutiny, yet even her foresight had limits. Each whispered comment, each pointed glance, was a potential crack in the mask she had worn so successfully for years. The audience begins to sense the growing tension. The stakes have shifted from subtle manipulation to survival, from influence to exposure. Venice itself, with its labyrinthine alleys and secretive palaces, played an unwitting role in the emergence of suspicion. Meetings that were once perfectly orchestrated now carried the risk of discovery. Observant neighbors, rival courtiers, and curious servants could piece together seemingly unrelated events, forming a narrative that might point directly back to her. Even the city's geography, which had once been an ally in concealment, became a reminder of the precariousness of her position. A misdelivered letter, an overheard conversation, or a servant's casual remark could illuminate truths that she had worked so hard to obscure. The tension of the narrative builds as the audience realizes that, in a society as interconnected and observant as Venice, the margin for error is vanishingly small. Investigations, though primitive by modern standards, began to take shape. Physicians were consulted repeatedly, complaints of mysterious ailments raised suspicions, and concerned family members pressed for explanations. The aristocrat, aware of the growing scrutiny, responded with calculated poise, masking anxiety beneath her practiced elegance. She feigned concern, offered assistance, and maintained her public charm, all while subtly steering inquiries away from the truth. Her ability to manipulate perception became paramount. She understood that suspicion could be deflected with timing, logic, and performance. By controlling the narrative, she retained the upper hand, even as invisible eyes began to scrutinize her every move. The psychological tension heightens here, as viewers witness her delicate balancing act. Every decision, every gesture, and every word could either reinforce her control or lead to catastrophic exposure. The aristocrat's psychological landscape during this period reveals both brilliance and vulnerability. While she excelled at anticipating the actions of others, the constant threat of discovery weighed heavily on her mind. Paranoia, though carefully disguised, began to shape her behavior. She questioned loyalties, scrutinized even minor interactions, and recalibrated her plans with heightened intensity. The very traits that had allowed her to dominate others, the meticulous attention to detail, the ability to read human behavior, and the strategic patience, now amplified her own anxiety. Yet, this pressure also reinforced her cunning. The need to evade detection sharpened her strategies, leading to increasingly sophisticated maneuvers designed to maintain both her freedom and her power. Social dynamics played a critical role in the unfolding investigation. Allies of her victims, rival families, and concerned citizens all began forming opinions. Rumors spread through salons and marketplaces, and subtle alliances emerged aimed at uncovering the truth. The aristocrat, ever perceptive, recognized the shifting landscape and responded with deft manipulation. She diverted attention, sowed doubt among inquisitors, and exploited existing rivalries to protect her position. Every encounter became a test of control, and each reaction offered insights that she could use to further her aims. In this way, the narrative becomes a chess game, where every player moves according to hidden motivations, and the stakes are nothing less than life, reputation, and power. As fear began to infiltrate her circles, the victims themselves were no longer passive. Their weakened states, combined with subtle intuition and growing suspicion, led some to question the nature of their misfortunes. Even when lacking concrete evidence, the sense that something was deeply wrong created tension and anxiety that played directly into the aristocrat's hands, as social panic and mistrust disrupted the balance of power. Yet, simultaneously, it heightened the risk of exposure. Each misstep, each miscalculation, could unravel years of careful orchestration. The suspense reaches a peak in this section, as the audience senses that discovery is no longer a matter of possibility, but inevitability. By the end of this section, Venice itself feels like a city on the brink, teetering between elegant sophistication and the revelation of hidden malevolence. The aristocrat, while still in control, faces pressures from multiple angles: curiosity, fear, and human observation that threaten to pierce her carefully maintained mask. Suspicion has emerged as a force she cannot entirely command, forcing her to navigate an increasingly treacherous world where a single error could undo everything. The tension, psychological depth, and historical context create a vivid portrait of a society in which appearances are paramount and deception is both art and weapon. The stage is set for confrontation, revelation, and the eventual consequences of her actions, leaving the audience both enthralled and apprehensive about what is yet to come. The web of deception that the aristocrat had so carefully spun could not remain intact forever. In a society as observant and gossip-driven as Venice, even the most meticulously hidden crimes eventually attract attention, and whispers that were once contained began to swell into murmurs too loud to ignore. A series of suspicious deaths, combined with the subtle but perceptible patterns of illness among her rivals, finally drew the eyes of authorities and inquisitive citizens alike. Venice, while a city celebrated for its beauty and refinement, had mechanisms of justice designed to protect the elite, yet it was also a place where scandal could destroy reputations overnight. The aristocrat, whose life had been built upon patience, manipulation, and charm, now faced a reality she had long prepared for others but had never truly confronted herself: the consequences of her actions. The initial suspicions were subtle, arising from careful observation rather than concrete proof. Servants whispered among themselves about repeated illnesses, physicians noted patterns that defied natural explanation, and surviving victims began sharing suspicions in hushed conversations behind closed doors. Each anecdote, minor complaint, or shared rumor contributed to a growing sense that something was deeply amiss within the aristocrat's palazzo. Yet, even as suspicion mounted, she maintained her outward composure, masking any hint of fear with the elegance and poise that had become her signature. Her ability to perform under pressure, to manipulate perception even in the face of scrutiny, delayed exposure and allowed her to continue influencing events, albeit with increasing caution. Eventually, the pressure reached a point where formal investigation became unavoidable. Venetian authorities, motivated both by duty and public concern, began assembling evidence, questioning witnesses, and examining the patterns of illness and death that had surrounded her. The trial, when it commenced, was a spectacle that captivated the city. It was not merely a legal proceeding but a dramatic public event, drawing attention from every stratum of society. The aristocrat, once untouchable in her social sphere, now faced interrogation and judgment under the very structures she had manipulated so skillfully for years. The courtroom was filled with tension. The elegant architecture, the whispers of onlookers, and the stern gazes of magistrates created an atmosphere of both dread and fascination. Testimonies from family members, servants, and physicians were both detailed and damning. Each account, whether describing a sudden bout of illness or a suspicious circumstance, painted a picture of premeditation and cruelty. The aristocrats' previously concealed methods, the careful administration of poison, the manipulation of daily routines, the exploitation of trust, were now laid bare for all to see. The contrast between her public persona and private malice struck the city with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The audience, like the Venetian public within the story, is invited to reflect on the duality of human nature, how charm and elegance can mask calculated evil, and how ambition, when untempered by morality, can transform a person into a figure of terror. The aristocrat's reaction during the trial added a new dimension to her story. She displayed the composure of a master strategist, listening to accusations with measured expressions, responding to questions with carefully chosen words, and maintaining an air of dignity despite the gravity of the charges. Yet beneath this calm exterior, one can imagine the pressure and fear that accompanied each moment. Every response, every pause, became a potential liability. Every gesture could be interpreted as guilt or deception. The psychological drama was as intense as the legal proceedings themselves, and it is this tension, the delicate interplay between performance and reality, that makes the narrative compelling. The audience experiences not only the unraveling of her schemes, but also the fragile humanity of a woman whose brilliance has become inseparable from her hubris. Ultimately, the verdict was inevitable. In a city both fascinated and repelled by her crimes, justice, partial, public, and symbolic, was served. Punishments for aristocrats in Venice were designed not only to remove culpability, but also to serve as a warning, to restore a sense of order in a society shaken by scandal. The aristocrat faced her fate with the same calculated demeanor that had characterized her life, yet the weight of exposure, public judgment, and inevitable loss could not be entirely concealed. The trial concluded, but the echoes of her actions would reverberate far beyond the courtroom, influencing family fortunes, social alliances, and the collective memory of the city itself. The legacy of the Midnight Poisoner extended well beyond her personal downfall. Her story became a cautionary tale within Venice, a dark narrative whispered through generations about ambition, duplicity, and the dangers of underestimating the cunning of those who operate behind a veneer of civility. Families became more vigilant, alliances more fragile, and the public more attuned to the shadows beneath glittering masks. Yet, there was also fascination, an enduring curiosity about how a single individual could wield influence and death with such subtlety, transforming social charm into a weapon of fear. Historians and storytellers would later dissect her methods, motivations, and psychological complexity, cementing her place in the annals of dark Venetian history. By the end of this section, the audience understands both the inevitability of her fall and the broader societal consequences. Venice, with its beauty, sophistication, and shadows, becomes not just a backdrop, but an active participant in the story. The aristocrat, once a master of manipulation, is confronted by the ultimate truth, that no amount of charm or cunning can fully shield one from discovery and accountability. The trial and subsequent legacy underscore the duality of human ambition, the fragility of power built on deceit, and the haunting resonance of calculated cruelty. The narrative closes with reflection, leaving viewers to grapple with the chilling complexity of a figure who was both brilliant and terrifying, whose actions shaped the city long after her personal fate was sealed. The story of the Midnight Poisoner did not end with her trial or her punishment. Venice, a city accustomed to grandeur, intrigue, and secrecy, was forever altered by the revelations of her crimes. Even after the courtroom doors closed and the public spectacle faded, whispers continued to circulate through palaces, salons, and narrow alleyways. Families who had once navigated the city with confidence now moved with caution, aware that charm could conceal lethal intent and that alliances could be treacherous. The aristocrat's actions left a psychological imprint not only on her immediate victims, but also on the social fabric of the city itself, reshaping trust, fear, and perception among Venice's elite for years to come. The elegance of the canals and the glitter of masquerade balls could no longer fully mask the underlying fragility of a society built upon appearances and ambition. In the immediate aftermath, the families affected by her plots faced both personal and social consequences. Wealthy households, suddenly confronted with illness, death, and scandal, struggled to maintain their status in a society where reputation was currency. Matrimonial plans, political alliances, and business ventures were all disrupted as suspicion spread like wildfire. Servants who had witnessed unexplained illnesses and untimely deaths carried stories that, when repeated, shaped public opinion and fueled gossip networks. The aristocrat's ability to manipulate these very channels during her lifetime meant that her influence extended beyond her actions. She had embedded fear into the collective consciousness of the city. Trust became a fragile commodity. Once given confidences were scrutinized, and the shadows of her schemes lingered in every interaction, every social gathering, and every whispered conversation. Venice itself seemed to breathe differently after her exposure. The canals, once perceived as tranquil mirrors of beauty, now carried an undertone of unease. Narrow alleys and hidden staircases, previously celebrated for their romantic and practical qualities, became symbolic of concealment, secrecy, and unseen threats. Public spaces, where the elite had conducted their elegant dances of power and influence, now resonated with caution, as if the city itself remembered the hidden manipulations that had taken place within its walls. The specter of her crimes infused ordinary life with heightened awareness, demonstrating the lasting psychological impact of one individual's cunning and ambition. Even decades later, storytellers would recount tales of her meticulous cruelty, warning listeners of the peril that lurked behind perfect smiles and refined manners. The social repercussions were profound. Aristocratic families, once confident in their ability to navigate Venice's intricate web of politics and alliances, adopted new strategies of vigilance. Social gatherings were no longer purely displays of culture and status. They became carefully monitored events, where gestures, words, and behaviors were scrutinized for hidden intent. Trust, which had previously flowed easily among those of noble lineage, became conditional and strategic. In this climate of suspicion, even friendships were tempered by caution, and alliances were forged with an acute awareness of potential betrayal. The aristocrat's legacy, therefore, extended beyond the immediate victims of her schemes. She had altered the very social logic of Venice, embedding fear, calculation, and distrust into the daily lives of its elite. Psychologically, the city's elite became more cautious, more analytical, and more attuned to the subtle cues of deception. Her actions had revealed vulnerabilities in human behavior, how desire, vanity, and ambition could be manipulated for personal gain. Those who survived the era of her schemes internalized lessons in observation, intuition, and self-preservation. The aristocrats' meticulous planning and exploitation of trust served as a blueprint, consciously or unconsciously, for navigating social hierarchies. Fear, once abstract, became tangible. Paranoia, once unnecessary, became adaptive. In this way, her influence persisted in the minds and behaviors of the living long after her personal power was extinguished. The psychological legacy extended to ordinary citizens as well. Tales of her cruelty spread beyond the palaces and salons, entering the streets, markets, and inns of Venice. Common folk, often excluded from the intrigues of the elite, nevertheless learned the importance of caution, observation, and skepticism. The city's culture absorbed her narrative, transforming her actions into cautionary tales of ambition, deceit, and the dangers of underestimating those who operate in shadows. These stories were retold at gatherings, in whispers along canals, and in the art and literature of the period, embedding her presence into the collective memory of Venice. Her influence also reached into the legal and political frameworks of the city. Authorities, having been challenged by her ability to manipulate perception, refined investigative procedures and increased scrutiny over suspicious deaths and unexplained illnesses among the elite. Court protocols, the gathering of testimonies, and the oversight of medical practitioners were subtly strengthened, reflecting lessons learned from her crimes. In this way, Venice itself adapted, becoming slightly more vigilant, slightly more skeptical, and slightly better prepared to prevent such manipulation in the future. Even as her presence faded physically, her legacy persisted institutionally, shaping the mechanisms of justice and accountability within the city. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a profound understanding of the enduring impact of the Midnight Poisoner. Venice, though outwardly unchanged in its beauty and opulence, had been transformed internally. Trust was fractured, vigilance heightened, and the shadows of human ambition revealed as ever-present threats. The aristocrat's life and crimes became a lens through which the city, and by extension, the audience, could explore the interplay of power, deception, and consequence. Her story demonstrates that the impact of human cunning extends far beyond immediate victims, influencing social structures, psychological norms, and collective memory for generations. The tale closes not with resolution, but with reflection, leaving viewers to consider the chilling reality that darkness can linger long after justice is served. Venice, a city of light and shadow, canals and palaces, beauty and menace, stands as a testament to the duality of human nature. The Midnight Poisoner may have fallen, but her legacy, her methods, and the fear she instilled continue to echo through history, reminding all who study her story that behind elegance and sophistication often lie currents of ambition, malice, and unseen power.